The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall classroom windows, throwing warm bars of light across rows of scratched wooden desks. 16-year-old Steven Seagal sat near the back, hunched slightly over his history textbook. He was a quiet kid, tall for his age with long dark hair that often drew teasing remarks. That afternoon he wore a neatly pressed white school shirt, his favorite one, because he had judo practice straight after class. The room buzzed with the low chatter of students waiting for the teacher to arrive. Steven kept to himself, carefully taking notes from yesterday's lesson. To most of his classmates, he was the quiet, artsy kid, the one who never got into trouble. But his calm nature sometimes made him an easy target. The door banged open. Ricky, Mark, and Todd, the school's notorious trio of troublemakers, strolled in late, exchanging grins as they spotted Steven at the back. Ricky elbowed Mark and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Look who's hiding behind the books again." The wannabe ninja. A few kids chuckled nervously. Steven didn't lift his head. He'd heard it all before. He kept his pencil moving across the page, determined not to take the bait. But the three bullies weren't satisfied. They swaggered down the aisle, stopping by his desk. "Hey, monk boy," Todd sneered, flicking the corner of Steven's notebook. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Still no reaction. Steven's silence only made them bolder. Mark leaned down, his grin sharp. Maybe we should help him loosen up. Before Steven could react, Mark's fingers hooked the collar of Steven's shirt and gave it a sharp tug. The fabric ripped with an audible tear, leaving a jagged split down the shoulder seam. A burst of laughter broke out across the room. Some students laughed out of fear of the bullies, others out of shock. Steven froze for a moment, staring at the torn sleeve. The laughter rang in his ears, but his face stayed composed, calm, unreadable. Inside, however, a spark of anger flickered. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the desk, yet he said nothing. Instead, he slowly closed his notebook, laid his pencil aside with deliberate care, and raised his head to meet the bullies' smirking faces. The room went still, sensing the shift in the air. The classroom door creaked as Mr. Dalton, the history teacher, poked his head in. "Class, I'll be back in 10 minutes. Keep reviewing your notes for the quiz," he said, then stepped out to take a phone call. The moment the door clicked shut, the tension inside the room thickened. Steven remained seated, still calm, as though the rip in his shirt meant nothing. He straightened his posture and returned his gaze to the open textbook, trying to block out the murmurs around him. The rip along his shoulder exposed part of his collarbone, but he ignored the stares. The three bullies exchanged looks like predators spotting prey without a shepherd. Ricky tilted his chair back, grinning. "Looks like Sensei's got no one to protect him now," he said loud enough for the class to hear. A few kids giggled nervously. Most stayed silent, unsure whether to intervene or keep their heads down. Everyone knew these boys thrived on fear. Mark kicked the leg of Steven's desk. "Hey, ninja boy, you're too quiet. Don't you have something to say about your new fashion statement?" Steven's voice came out even and controlled. "I'd like to finish my notes." "Please leave me alone," Todd scoffed. "Please leave me alone. Did you hear that?" He mocked in a sing-song tone. Guess the mighty judo guy can't even stand up for himself. The taunts drew a few more chuckles from the room. A girl sitting by the window muttered under her breath, "Just stop it already." But her words were lost in the noise. Steven kept writing, each stroke of the pencil neat and deliberate. His calm composure only irritated the bullies further. To them, silence was weakness. Mark reached over again, this time pushing Steven's notebook off the desk. The book slid across the floor, pages crumpling against a chair leg. "Oops," Mark said with a fake smile. "Guess your notes wanted to run away too." Steven set his pencil down, leaned over, and picked the notebook up with measured slowness. He brushed the dust from the cover and placed it back on the desk as though nothing had happened. His restraint unsettled a few classmates who had started watching closely. Jenny, who sat 2 rows up, discreetly raised her phone to record. She sensed something was about to unfold. "Look at him, still acting like he's too good for us," Ricky jeered. "Bet he's scared stiff." Steven finally raised his eyes to meet Ricky's gaze. His tone remained calm but carried a quiet edge. "I'm not scared of you. I just don't see the point in fighting." For a heartbeat, the classroom went still. It wasn't the words themselves, but the steady way he said them, like someone stating a fact rather than making a threat. The bullies exchanged glances. Todd gave a low laugh. Oh, he's scared all right. Won't even defend himself. They circled slightly closer. Chairs scraped as other students slid away, creating an open space around Steven's desk. Some whispered nervously, "Should we get the teacher? He's gonna snap sooner or later." Steven stayed seated, his large hands resting flat on the desk, fingers relaxed but ready. He looked almost meditative, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, a straightening of the spine, a focus in the eyes that didn't go unnoticed by Jenny's recording lens. Mark made the next move. He jabbed Steven in the shoulder where the shirt had ripped. "You're all talk. Bet you can't even throw a punch," Steven spoke evenly. "I told you. I don't want trouble. Please stop." That single phrase, spoken without raising his voice, sent a ripple through the onlookers. Something about the way he said it sounded less like a plea and more like a warning, but the bullies only smirked. Ricky reached over and flicked Steven's long hair. "What are you gonna do, meditate us to death?" Another round of uneasy laughter rolled through the room. A boy sitting near the front whispered to his friend, "Why's he just sitting there? I heard he's been training judo for years." Steven heard it too, but gave no sign. His focus was on the bullies, his breathing steady. Inhale, exhale, each breath measured. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Another class changing rooms, but no teacher came to their door. Todd shoved Steven's chair suddenly, hard enough to make it scrape backward. "Stand up, Seagal. Let's see that judo magic." The shove made Steven's pencil roll to the edge of the desk and fall to the floor with a soft clatter. For the first time, Steven's eyes hardened. He rose slowly to his full height, towering slightly over the bullies. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, almost too calm, and that calmness made the trio take an involuntary step back. The chatter of the room died down. Even the gigglers at the back went quiet. Jenny's phone trembled slightly in her grip as she kept recording. Steven adjusted the strap of his torn shirt with one hand and said quietly, "I asked you to stop. Don't push this further." The words landed heavier than a shout would have. The bullies glanced at each other, trying to mask their hesitation with smirks. Mark muttered under his breath, "Man, he's bluffing. Let's show him he's not so tough." Ricky nodded toward the door. "Teacher's not coming back yet. We've got time." Todd cracked his knuckles with a grin. "Then let's make him talk." But before anyone could make another move, Steven shifted his weight. Stepping one foot slightly back in a subtle but unmistakable martial stance, his shoulders still relaxed, arms at his sides but ready. Those who knew about fighting recognized the change instantly, even if the bullies didn't. A boy near the back whispered, "He's about to do something." The air in the room felt charged, every student leaning forward in anticipation. The room had gone unnaturally still. The scrape of Steven's chair on the floor still echoed in everyone's ears as he stood to his full height. At 16, he was lean but broad-shouldered, towering slightly over the three bullies. The torn seam of his white shirt fluttered as a breeze slipped in through the open window. Steven's brown eyes locked on Ricky, the one who had flicked his hair a moment ago. His gaze wasn't angry. It was controlled, almost detached, yet there was a weight in it that made Ricky shift uncomfortably. "Sit back down," Mark said, trying to sound bold, but his voice cracked halfway. Steven didn't move, didn't raise his fists. He simply straightened his posture, feet sliding apart by a few inches as if he were settling into the floor itself. Those who had ever watched a martial arts demo recognized the stance. Todd snorted, breaking the silence. "You gonna bow to us, monk boy? Do it, then we'll let you off easy." No answer. Steven's breathing stayed slow, steady. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Ricky, unwilling to let the moment slip, jabbed a finger at Steven's chest. "What's the matter?" Afraid to hit back? "You're nothing but a poser." The jab was the spark that lit the fuse. Steven's hand shot up, not in a punch, but in a smooth upward block that redirected Ricky's finger aside. It was so quick, most of the class barely saw it. They only heard Ricky's surprised grunt. "Whoa," whispered a boy by the window. Jenny's phone trembled as she continued recording. Steven's voice came low and even. "I told you to stop. This is your last chance." The quiet authority in his tone made even a few onlookers shiver. The bullies, however, laughed to cover their unease. Mark stepped forward, shoving Steven's shoulder hard. "Or what? You'll meditate us into behaving?" That push shifted Steven a single step back. He planted his feet again, his back straightening as if some inner switch had flipped. In that instant, the classroom no longer saw the quiet boy who sat at the back. They saw an athlete who had spent years perfecting control and balance. Todd smirked and lunged, trying to shove Steven again. This time, Steven moved, but not backward. He pivoted slightly on his left foot, his right arm hooking under Todd's extended elbow, his left hand guiding Todd's shoulder. In one seamless motion, like water flowing around a rock, Steven redirected the bully's own forward momentum and flipped him over his hip. A collective gasp filled the room as Todd's feet left the floor, and he landed flat on the mat of linoleum, with a thud that rattled the desks. "Whoa, did you see that?" Someone shouted. Todd groaned, more shocked than hurt, staring up at the ceiling in disbelief. Mark cursed under his breath and rushed forward, fists raised. Steven stepped aside at the last second, catching Mark's wrist with a circular motion that redirected the swing. With a small twist and a gentle pull of Mark's arm, he spun the second bully off balance and sent him tumbling against a nearby desk. Chairs screeched across the floor as students scrambled back, forming a wide circle. "Stop it!" cried a girl near the front, but the fight's momentum had already shifted. Ricky hesitated, glancing at his fallen friends. His bravado faltered. "You think you're tough just 'cause you got lucky?" he said, though his voice betrayed a hint of fear. Steven lowered his hands slightly, palms outward, a gesture of peace rather than threat. "I don't want to hurt you, but I won't let you hurt me either." For a brief second, Ricky's shoulders slackened as if he might back down, but then, perhaps out of pride or fear of looking weak, he charged. Steven sidestepped with the grace of someone who had done it thousands of times in the dojo. Using Ricky's own momentum, he caught the bully's sleeve, turned on his heel, and guided Ricky's weight forward and down. Ricky's back met the floor with a soft smack, breath leaving his lungs in a startled oof. Gasps, then cheers erupted from a few brave students. Jenny's phone captured every moment, the seamless throws, the calm expression on Steven's face, the stunned disbelief on the bullies' faces. For a long moment, no one moved. The three bullies lay scattered, not injured, just dazed, blinking up at the ceiling while trying to process what had happened. Steven adjusted the torn collar of his shirt, then crouched beside Todd, who was still on the floor. His voice carried a quiet steadiness. "Get up. Go back to your desk. I don't want this to go any further." Todd, wide-eyed, nodded and slowly climbed to his feet, dusting himself off. Mark followed, rubbing his shoulder. Ricky sat up, staring at Steven as if seeing him for the first time. The class remained silent, the tension replaced by an air of awe. Steven didn't gloat or smile. Instead, he retrieved his fallen pencil, set it on his desk, and calmly returned to his seat. Jenny lowered her phone and whispered to her friend. He didn't even look angry. It's like he was just ready. The bullies slunk back to their seats, their earlier smirks gone, replaced by sheepish silence. The fight was over, but the lesson was only beginning. By the time the teacher returned, the room had changed, and so had everyone's opinion of the quiet kid in the back. For several seconds after the last throw, the classroom felt frozen in time. The only sounds were the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights and the rustle of notebook pages from a draft sneaking through the open window. Steven sat calmly at his desk as though nothing unusual had happened. The three bullies, now seated again, avoided his eyes, their earlier bravado replaced by uneasy silence. Near the back, Jenny slowly lowered her phone and whispered, "Did anyone else feel like we just watched a movie scene?" Her friend Maya nodded, still wide-eyed. He didn't even look mad, he just knew exactly what to do. The classroom door swung open suddenly, making everyone jump. Mr. Dalton returned, holding a stack of handouts. He paused at the doorway, sensing the tension in the room. "What's going on here? Why is everyone so quiet?" he asked, scanning the faces. His eyes lingered on Todd, who was brushing dirt off his elbow, and on the faint scrape marks on the floor where chairs had been pushed aside. No one spoke at first. Mark quickly bent over his desk as if deeply focused on his notes. Ricky tried to hide his flushed face behind a book. Steven simply looked back at Mr. Dalton, polite and composed. "All right," Mr. Dalton said slowly, setting the handouts on the front desk. "If anyone wants to explain why the seating arrangement looks like a hurricane passed through, now's the time." Jenny exchanged glances with Maya. Finally, she raised her hand. "Sir, there was a, disagreement while you were out. But it's settled now. The teacher's brows arched. Disagreement? His gaze drifted toward the bullies again. Is everyone okay? Todd muttered. Yeah, we're fine. The reply sounded more like a confession than reassurance. Mr. Dalton frowned but decided not to press further. He was already late for the quiz review. All right then. I don't want any more disruptions. Open your books to page 93. The students obeyed, but the air hadn't cleared. Whispers began to ripple through the rows as they turned pages. Maya leaned forward to whisper to the boy in front of her. Did you see the way Steven moved? Like he'd been training for years. The boy nodded. I heard his uncle teaches martial arts. Makes sense now. At the far corner, one student was secretly texting on his phone. You won't believe this. Steven flipped Todd like it was nothing. Within minutes, word started trickling through the school's unofficial chat groups. Meanwhile, the bullies sat stiffly, staring down at their books but clearly not reading. Todd rubbed his shoulder where he'd landed, wincing slightly. Mark shot him a look that said, don't say a word. Ricky avoided eye contact with everyone. Steven focused on his textbook, seemingly oblivious to the whispers. Yet his senses stayed alert. Years of judo training had taught him to remain aware of his surroundings. He wasn't proud of what happened, but he didn't regret standing up for himself. When Mr. Dalton began writing key dates on the board, the hushed whispers returned. A girl near the window said softly, I always thought he was weird for being so quiet, but now I get it. He's just disciplined. Her seatmate replied, yeah, he didn't even throw a punch. He just defended himself. The respect in their voices was unmistakable. For the first time, Steven's classmates were beginning to see past his quiet exterior. 10 minutes into the review, Mr. Dalton turned around and caught Ricky staring blankly at the floor. Ricky, why don't you answer question 2 about the Treaty of Versailles? The teacher prompted. Ricky stammered, I don't know, drawing a few giggles from the class. His confidence had been shaken. Steven remained silent, but a small flicker of something, almost sympathy, ran across his face. He knew humiliation could sting just as much as a throw to the floor. The rest of the lesson passed without incident, though the undercurrent of curiosity about Steven's skills lingered. When the bell finally rang, students packed their bags quickly, some stealing glances at Steven as they filed out. Jenny approached his desk cautiously, phone in hand. Hey, Steven, she said quietly. He looked up, expression neutral but attentive. I recorded everything, she confessed. Don't worry, I'm not going to post it without your permission. I just thought, you should know how incredible you looked out there. Steven blinked in mild surprise. You recorded it? Jenny nodded. Yeah, the way you stayed calm. It was amazing. Most people would have lost it. He gave a small, almost shy smile. I only did what I had to do. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Her friend Maya joined in. You're seriously like a real-life movie hero. I didn't know you knew judo. Steven shrugged lightly. I've been training since I was a kid. It's not about fighting. It's about control. The girls exchanged impressed looks before heading out. Steven packed his books slowly, adjusting the torn shirt sleeve as he prepared to leave for actual judo practice. Across the room, Ricky watched him go but said nothing. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a thoughtful, almost grudging look of respect. In the hallway, whispers followed Steven as students from other classes peeked curiously at the quiet boy with the ripped shirt. The story of what had happened was already spreading beyond the classroom walls, gathering details, some exaggerated, most in awe. By the next morning, Steven's life at school would feel different. The bullies had been humbled, but their pride still burned, and Steven's calm defiance was becoming the talk of the entire campus. The next morning, the autumn sun lit the school courtyard in warm streaks of gold, but the air between the bullies felt anything but bright. Todd, Mark, and Ricky lingered near the bike racks before first period, their conversation low and tense. Todd kicked at a loose pebble. We can't just let him humiliate us like that, he muttered, his voice rougher than usual. Mark crossed his arms. Humiliate? We went after him first. We looked like fools because we underestimated him. Ricky's jaw clenched. Everyone's talking about it. My cousin in the sophomore hall already heard. They're calling us the Flying Three. Todd's face turned red. You think I don't know? My phone's been blowing up with memes since last night. He glanced at the classroom window where he knew Steven usually sat near the second row. We have to do something. We can't let a new kid show us up. Mark hesitated. I say we lay low. He's not normal, Todd. The way he moved, like he'd trained for years. If we push him again, we might end up looking worse. Ricky added quietly. And that girl Jenny recorded everything. What if it goes online? Todd's pride, however, was louder than reason. I'm not scared of him. He just got lucky yesterday. At that moment, Steven entered the courtyard carrying his judo gear bag slung casually over one shoulder. He moved without hurry, eyes focused ahead, as if he didn't notice the stares or the whispers that followed him. A few younger students nudged each other, pointing discreetly at his torn backpack strap, the same one that had been ripped in yesterday's scuffle. Jenny and Maya were sitting on a bench nearby, watching the scene unfold. I think they're planning something, Maya whispered. Jenny frowned. They'd better not. He was patient yesterday, but he won't let them hurt him again. As the bell rang, the three bullies trailed behind Steven into the building, exchanging hushed words. But when Steven entered the classroom, he simply greeted Mr. Dalton with a polite nod and took his seat, pulling out his notebook as though nothing had happened. The rest of the students noticed his calm demeanor and respected it. The giggles and whispers that had filled the halls now carried a note of admiration. Some even greeted him with a casual, "Hey, Steven," which was new. He'd been practically invisible to most of them just 2 days ago. During homeroom announcements, Ricky kept glancing at Steven, almost expecting him to gloat. But Steven stayed focused, his attention fixed on the chalkboard. That quiet composure unsettled them more than any taunt could have. After the bell, Steven headed toward the gym for morning practice. The bullies, instead of following, stopped at the water fountain. Mark finally said what had been sitting heavy on his chest. Maybe we owe him an apology. Todd snapped his head around. Are you kidding? We don't apologize to guys like him. We get even, Ricky hesitated. Even for what? We started it. He just defended himself. For the first time, Ricky's voice lacked its usual bite. Todd ignored him and stormed off, clearly brewing his next move. That afternoon, while students lined up for lunch in the cafeteria, the buzz about Steven still lingered. A group at the center table debated his background. I heard his dad's in the military, one boy speculated. No way, said another. Jenny said he's been training in judo since he was 7. Makes sense why he's so disciplined. At a nearby table, Steven quietly ate his sandwich, tuning out the gossip. Jenny sat down across from him with a smile. Word's spreading fast, she said. Some kids think you're like a black belt secret agent or something. Steven chuckled softly. I'm not. I just train to stay balanced. People always assume martial arts is about fighting, but it's mostly about learning how not to fight. Jenny studied him for a moment. I believe that. But I also think you scared them more by being calm. They don't know what to do with that. Before Steven could answer, Todd walked past their table, tray in hand. He slowed down just enough to mutter under his breath, "Enjoy the attention while it lasts." Steven looked up briefly, meeting Todd's eyes, but said nothing. His silence seemed to weigh more than any comeback could. Later in the locker room before PE, Todd finally confronted his two friends again. Today after school we wait for him behind the gym, Todd declared. Mark groaned. You still don't get it. He's stronger and faster. Why pick another fight we'll lose? Todd's expression hardened. It's about respect. People think we're cowards now. Ricky shifted uncomfortably. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. I'm done being the jerk everyone hates. Todd rolled his eyes. Fine, if you're too scared, don't come. He slammed his locker shut and walked out, leaving his friends in uneasy silence. As classes ended for the day, Steven stayed behind to help Mr. Dalton organize bookshelves. By the time he stepped into the hallway, the usual crowd had cleared. He adjusted the strap of his judo bag and headed toward the gym's side exit. Outside, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Steven noticed movement near the back fence, Todd leaning against the wall, arms crossed. A flicker of caution sparked in Steven's mind, but he continued forward, ready for whatever came next. Jenny, leaving the art room, spotted the two figures and sensed trouble brewing. She pulled out her phone again and whispered to Maya, "Something's about to happen by the gym. Come on." As they approached from a distance, Mark and Ricky appeared as well, trailing reluctantly behind Todd. The scene was set. Pride against patience, hot tempers against calm resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, The standoff near the gym was inevitable. The bullies had bruised egos to mend, and Steven had a lesson in restraint yet to deliver. The late-day sky had turned a soft orange as the last rays of sunlight spilled across the empty school courtyard. The sound of distant traffic hummed beyond the chain-link fence while a breeze stirred fallen leaves. Across the cracked pavement, Steven adjusted the strap of his judo bag and walked steadily toward the gym's side gate. He'd felt the tension in the air long before he saw anyone there. Years of martial arts training had taught him to sense a challenge approaching, not through sight or sound, but in the stillness that gathers right before trouble strikes. Near the gym wall, Todd stepped forward from the shadow of a tall oak tree. His jaw was set, his arms folded in an attempt to look bigger. Mark and Ricky trailed several paces behind, their expressions far less confident than Todd's. Todd's voice cut through the evening quiet. "So, you think you can embarrass us and just walk away like nothing happened?" Steven stopped about 6 feet from him, his face calm as ever. "I didn't embarrass you," Steven replied evenly. "You embarrassed yourselves when you went after me. I just stopped you from hurting me." Todd's lips curled into a sneer. "You're still acting like you're better than us. You think everyone's afraid of you because you know a few karate tricks." "It's not about being better," Steven said, keeping his tone level. "And it's not karate, it's judo. It's for defense, not for proving who's tough." The breeze rustled again, tossing a few dry leaves past their feet. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Todd, maybe we should just let it go." "We already—" "Quiet," Todd snapped, cutting Mark off. His pride burned hotter than his fear. Steven's brown eyes stayed fixed on Todd. "I don't want to fight. You can still walk away." Todd dropped his bag on the ground and stepped closer. "You don't get to tell me what to do. Today you're going to regret showing me up." From the far end of the courtyard, Jenny and Maya appeared, keeping a cautious distance as they recorded with Jenny's phone. They'd seen enough yesterday to know Steven could handle himself, but they also wanted proof in case Todd tried something worse. "Steven," Jenny called out. "You don't have to do this." Steven turned his head slightly toward her voice. "It's okay. I'm not starting anything." Todd took that moment of distraction as his cue. With a sudden yell, he lunged forward, swinging an open-handed shove aimed at Steven's chest, but Steven had been ready. He sidestepped neatly, catching Todd's wrist in mid-motion. Using Todd's momentum against him, Steven pivoted and guided him over his hip in one fluid motion. Todd's feet left the ground before he even realized what had happened. With a solid thud, he landed flat on the matte hard asphalt. The breath knocked out of him. A gasp escaped Mark and Ricky, and even Jenny's camera wobbled for a moment. Steven released Todd's wrist immediately and stepped back, his stance neutral again. "That's judo," he said calmly. "It's about control, not hurting." Todd groaned, scrambling to his knees. Anger flared brighter than the pain in his shoulder. You think you're so clever," he spat, struggling to his feet again. Steven didn't move. "Stay down, Todd. I don't want to throw you again." Ricky stepped forward, glancing nervously between them. "Todd, maybe enough's enough. He's not even trying to fight." But Todd wasn't done. He charged again, this time swinging a wild punch. Steven shifted to the side, catching Todd's arm and sweeping his leg in a classic judo trip. Once more, Todd toppled, this time rolling onto the grass beside the pavement. Mark rushed to Todd's side, raising his hands toward Steven as if to signal surrender. Okay. We get it," Mark said quickly. "He's had enough." Todd sat up slowly, panting, his eyes flashing with frustration. But now there was no mistaking the tremor in his voice. "You just wait. This isn't over." Steven shook his head, lowering his arms. "It's already over. You don't need another bruise to figure that out." Jenny approached cautiously, lowering her phone. "I recorded everything," she said to Todd. "If you try to start trouble again, the principal's going to see all of this." Todd glared at her but didn't respond. He brushed dirt off his jeans, muttering under his breath. Ricky helped him stand while Mark picked up Todd's dropped bag. None of them looked Steven in the eye as they backed away toward the parking lot. As the courtyard grew quieter again, Maya exhaled. "That was intense." Steven adjusted the strap of his judo bag once more. His voice stayed calm, almost tired. "I told him I didn't want to fight. Some people just have to feel the ground before they understand." Jenny stopped recording and offered him a small smile. "You stayed in control the whole time." "I'm glad I caught that on video." Steven nodded. "Just make sure it doesn't become some spectacle online. I don't want to humiliate him more than he's already done to himself." Jenny considered his words for a moment and then agreed. I'll keep it private, unless he tries something again. The three of them walked out together, the tension of the standoff slowly lifting as the first cool breath of evening settled over the campus. Later that night, Todd sat in his bedroom nursing a sore elbow. His pride ached far worse than his bruises. Mark sat across from him on the floor scrolling through his phone. Man, Mark said quietly, we're lucky he didn't press charges or tell the teachers. You need to let this go. Todd stared at the carpet, silent for a long moment. Finally, he muttered, We'll see. But deep down, even Todd knew he had no more excuses. Twice he'd gone after Steven. Twice he'd ended up on the ground. The video of the standoff wouldn't stay private for long. By morning, the entire school, and even a few local news blogs, would be buzzing about Steven Seagal, the calm kid who stopped the bullies without throwing a single punch. The morning bell rang across campus as students streamed into the main hall, chattering louder than usual. Something was in the air, an excited energy that made teachers glance at one another curiously. Steven walked in with his judo bag slung over his shoulder, unaware of what was waiting. A few heads turned as he passed. Whispers followed him down the hallway. Some of the younger kids even moved aside to let him through, their faces filled with a mix of awe and curiosity. By the time he reached his locker, Jenny came rushing up to him, phone in hand. Steven, she said, slightly out of breath. It's already everywhere. The video from yesterday, somebody posted it last night. Steven's brow furrowed. I thought you said you'd keep it private. I did, Jenny replied quickly. But I think Maya sent it to her cousin just to show her, and now it's on TikTok, Instagram, even our school's group chat. It has over 50,000 views already. Steven exhaled slowly, shaking his head. I didn't want it to turn into a spectacle. Jenny looked at him apologetically. It's not as bad as you think. Most of the comments are on your side. People are calling you the calm kid with the judo throw. They're saying you showed how to stand up to bullies without losing control. A few students nearby nodded in agreement. One boy called out, Hey Seagal! That move you did on Todd, epic. Another added, Dude, you didn't even hit him. That was awesome. Steven offered a polite smile but didn't bask in the attention. It wasn't supposed to be a show, he said quietly. Across the hall, Todd leaned against a locker with his arms folded, watching the attention shift toward Steven. His bruised elbow rested in a makeshift sling, a visible reminder of the confrontation. Mark and Ricky stood beside him, noticeably less defiant than before. Can you believe this? Todd muttered bitterly. Now he's some kind of hero. Ricky shifted uncomfortably. He didn't start the fight, Todd, we did. And he could have embarrassed us way worse, but he didn't. Todd clenched his jaw, refusing to respond, but deep down he knew Ricky was right. The more he thought about it, the more the anger started to give way to shame. Later that morning, during homeroom announcements, the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker. Students, I'd like to remind everyone that violence of any kind is unacceptable. However, we should also acknowledge the importance of resolving conflicts peacefully and showing respect to one another. The entire class glanced at Steven, who sat quietly, eyes on his notebook. At lunch, a group of students invited him to sit at their table. Jenny and Maya were already there. You know, one boy said, you should start a self-defense club. I'd join for sure. Another girl chimed in, it's cool how you stayed calm. My brother saw the video and said that's exactly what martial arts should look like. Steven gave a small smile but shook his head. Judo isn't about showing off. It's about learning balance in the body and in the mind. If I ever teach it, that's what I want people to understand first. Jenny nodded approvingly. That's why the video's making such an impact. It's not just about the throw. It's about how you handled it. That afternoon, Todd approached Steven near the bike racks. He walked slowly, shoulders tense, clearly wrestling with what he wanted to say. Steven turned to face him, his expression neutral. Todd hesitated, then blurted out, Look, I was wrong. We were wrong. I shouldn't have ripped your shirt or picked that fight. You didn't deserve any of it. The words hung in the air. Ricky and Mark stood behind Todd, both looking surprised but relieved to hear it. Steven nodded once. It takes guts to admit that. I accept your apology. Todd let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. For what it's worth, you're good at that judo stuff. I'll, stay out of your way. You don't have to stay out of my way, Steven said. Just don't go looking for fights. You'll save yourself a lot of trouble." For the first time in days, Todd gave a faint, awkward smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. By the end of the week, the video had reached nearly 250,000 views online. Students across other schools started sharing it with hashtags like respect over violence and how Judo for peace. Teachers even used the clip as an example during a school assembly about conflict resolution. Jenny stood beside Steven as the principal commended him in front of the class for staying composed under pressure. Steven listened humbly, replying only with a polite, "Thank you, sir," when the applause came. That night he reflected on everything in his journal. "Strength," he wrote, "isn't measured by how many people you can beat down, but by how many fights you can walk away from." Steven Seagal never asked to be the center of attention, but his quiet strength and respect for others left a mark far beyond the classroom. In the end, it wasn't the judo throw that changed things. It was his discipline, patience, and the courage to stand tall without striking a single blow.